Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a major Greenland update that is absolutely critical to the future of the island and the United States acquiring Greenland. The process now, the US and Trump are normalizing their relationship. There's direct flights from the United States to Greenland. We've got this article, Greenland. It's very important to the United States based off of a number of reasons, of course, as we've mentioned in previous videos. You can see in this article, they talk about on June 14th, the day Trump turned 79, the U.S. carrier launched its first inaugural flight from Newark to Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. And so this is a huge milestone for the United States and really Greenland and Greenlanders starting to normalize the United States being involved with the direct flight from New Jersey to their biggest city. And also in this article, a few other things that I've learned is that the United States really has not started any crazy propaganda campaign yet within Greenland, because that's something that we would expect would happen for the United States to be able to convince Greenlanders that they should want to be ruled by the United States over Denmark, which shouldn't be too hard to do considering they already want to be out totally from under Danish rule. Technically, they cannot have a military because of Denmark. Not that their military would be very big considering they only have a population of around 57,000, but either way, this is a diplomatic thing that Trump wants to do, even though he said, well, maybe it might have to be by force, we're not sure. It's not something that's very popular. When would this be done? Possibly right after the midterms, possibly in a lame duck period. That's what I would project. But this is just another show that the United States, I mean, we've got a few different things that not a lot of people know about. We've got the United States changing the overall area in which they cover to include Greenland as part of North America. It was previously assigned under the command of European, and so they changed it to North American, and it's like, this is our land, this is part of our sphere of influence. This article talks about it. It says, well, New York City is closer to Greenland than Copenhagen is to Greenland. Well, it's not even that. Look how close Maine is to Greenland. I mean, this is within the North American footprint. We understand this. And it's all about convincing and really having Denmark cooperate with the United States to where we could give them something. But all this stuff that's going on, these direct flights, changing the command center, all of this is being done, these behind the scenes moves to normalize the United States acquiring Greenland, whether it's from Denmark, whether it's Greenland becoming independent of Denmark. The problem is Greenland is not moving quickly to do that, even though they supposedly want to do it, because they would have to undoubtedly have some type of relationship. I would assume, based on the fact that they're a proxy with the EU, they would want to have some type of relationship with the EU, whether it's a mining deal or just in general, because they do get significant subsidies from Denmark. If those go away, it's going to be very hard for them to maintain infrastructure. And so it's not as easy as them just saying, all right, we want to be independent. They have to have another plan in place if they fully try and go for independence from Denmark. The plan would probably be a wide-scale agreement with the EU overall. And so that's potentially what they'd be looking at. Trump is trying to make it to where that's not what happens. The United States will take it over and we'll cover everything. It'll give us our mining operations within Greenland. It will give us full military control, and more importantly, control of the Arctic waters, which is something that right now the United States are fighting over, the Russians are fighting over to a degree, and China is as well, as China tries to infringe and potentially do some type of deal with Greenland. That's been talked about within the past 2 months. And so you've got all these different situations bubbling to the surface within Greenland with the United States, with the EU, with China. Greenland knows they have to make deals. They can't hack it alone in terms of them totally being independent. They're still technically owned by Denmark, even though they want to be independent of them. They're kind of moving slowly to try and achieve that. There's no rapid advance in terms of having a referendum to push for some type of full independence from Denmark. And if you're Denmark, there was another article that came out of about a week ago about Denmark trying to sweeten the deal with Greenland and offer them potential money for infrastructure, money for mining. Denmark trying to not lose Greenland. Realistically, I'm not sure why, based off of the location of Greenland. If you're Denmark, you would figure you would love to make a deal with the United States to get yourself something, because the writing's on the wall that the people of Greenland do not want to be a part of Denmark anymore on Danish rule, why not try and get something for your country? And you also don't have to pay all the subsidies. Yeah, sure, you lose the control of land within the Arctic, and that's valuable, but based off of your country's size, right now with where we're at in 2025, it's more of a hindrance to where the United States, based off of how big our economy is and our military, we could more easily take over control of the island and help the people of Greenland when it comes to their expenses, when it comes to their infrastructure, their needs, more high quality jobs, things of that nature. We've just got a higher capacity to be able to produce the output that Greenland would require in terms of the infrastructure investment that would be needed onto the country. And so it's all a normalization process for the people of Greenland before any of the major campaigns even start. Don Jr. visits, JD Vance visits. Now you've got the flights happening. You can see this is the space base, one of the most important strategic military assets in U.S. control within the Arctic region. You can see that they talk about Trump. Why is he interested in Greenland? Well, Greenland's a very unique situation. Trump, first and foremost, wants land expansion. Let's understand that. It's just the reality. And Greenland itself, because they're controlled by Denmark, because they're a glacier, because they're right next to Canada, because they're only 57,000 people, because they have no military, this would be the most ideal situation to where if you take over a single island, it becomes a problem in the 21st century trying to take over anything. So for Trump, he wants land expansion. Certainly, we see where things are going within the Arctic. It's important to gain more control, gain more land area within the Arctic, and have access to different waterways within the Arctic as they get more and more important. But with Trump, it's a legacy thing, and he foresees the future, but it's also such a unique opportunity to get Greenland. That's the main point. And you can see they also talk about Greenland being a linchpin for monitoring Russian missile launches and naval movements. This is a very strategic area. Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, vital Atlantic choke point. And so it is a big deal. And you've also got potentially taking control of Greenland. You're a lot closer to Russia. The Russians may feel threatened by that. But Putin has come out and said, well, this is not something that we're too worried about. Trump can do what he wants. We're fighting our own war at this point. Trump sent out JD Vance. We know about that. Greenland's history with Denmark could potentially bolster Trump's efforts. It was colonized in the 18th century. I mean, it was under control of originally Denmark and Norway. And then they got in 2009 the Self-Governance Act. They became a lot more autonomous over the domestic affairs. Copenhagen still controls foreign policy and defense. And so Denmark is losing grip of Greenland at this point, and Greenlanders really, really do not want to be a part of them at this point. But it's just about, well, could they survive without the Danish subsidies? No, they couldn't, or it'd be a lot harder for them, so they're going to need another plan in place, basically. Trump is interested in Greenland. He doesn't give a fuck about Greenlanders. Well, the people would be in a better situation either way for the United States, whether or not Trump cares. It's irrelevant. It's a better situation for the United States, a more powerful country, to protect Greenland based on its strategic location than it is for Denmark. We all know this. The only reason Denmark has Greenland is because they colonized it way back when. Now it's a different time period. This requires a U.S. presence onto the island. That's what Trump is arguing. Trump says we got to secure the island. It's important. You talk about Denmark colonizing it. We understand the idea. They bring in NATO, talking about, well, Article 5. What if they are a proxy member of NATO. They're not going to, they bring in Article 5 for what exactly? There's going to be no fighting on Greenland. They're not going to, are the European countries really going to fight the United States on Greenland? I just can't see that happening. Emmanuel Macron of France did visit Greenland in June. European unity against Trump is what it was proposed as. And yes, the United States did previously. I mean, we controlled Greenland in the 1900s and 1940s because of World War II. We attempted to purchase Greenland 2 different times. And they talk about, well, us buying Greenland would alienate the Greenlanders against us. They boycotted Vance visiting. Yeah, that's because of the EU propaganda. That's why they boycotted that. When Don Jr. and Charlie Kirk went there, they were very welcoming, but then they get a bunch of bad propaganda about Trump being this fascist, and so they boycott it. It talks about them draining resources, not gaining resources. A hostile population, that's not correct. Governing a hostile population would drain, not gain resources. There's 57,000 people. And they would still have a lot of autonomy. We just want to be able to mine rare earth minerals and have control of the shipping lanes and be able to set up different bases within Greenland. I mean, technically, we already can do a certain amount of that if we did deals with Greenland, but there would still be. We'd have to say. I mean, they'd be a territory. Puerto Rico's a territory. Guam's a territory. There's a lot of territories that people don't even know about. U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa. There's a lot of U.S. territories. So they would still have their own government and everything like that, unless they became a state, which would require significant population change. Which, to be fair to them, that could be something that they would potentially be against. If you look at Alaska and what happened there, I mean, they were a territory for a while, and more people from the lower 48 moved up there, and they ended up becoming a state. Greenlanders may not want that. So that could be something that could be a bit of a trepidation for them in terms of them wanting to keep the population where it's at and not have U.S. involvement. But they do want our tourism. I mean, that's the main reason why there's this first nonstop flight from the United States to Greenland, and that was kind of the story of this article and what they went with in terms of explaining the history of the situation. But it is geopolitics. It's one of the things. I mean, at a certain point, I think Trump's probably going to have to put his foot down. It's not going to be something to where everyone's just going to get along and this is going to happen and it's going to be real easy. It's going to be one of those situations to where it's like, all right, this is happening. We've got to do it. And that's why Trump has said, and we'll see what Trump says. I mean, he hasn't said much on Greenland the past few months. It'd be interesting to see if he still feels the same way. I would imagine he probably does, because he's been very consistent. And this goes back to 2019, although they thought it was a joke in 2019, or at least more of a joke. Now, I mean, Trump, really, he didn't talk about it at all during the campaign because he knows it's not popular, and also there's no reason to talk about it unless you win. But the second that Trump wins, I mean, during the lame duck period, he was talking about taking Greenland. So, and the Greenlanders would say, well, we don't want a bunch of Americans moving to Greenland, which I can understand that, and that's something that there would be trepidation on. But if Trump really wants it, based off of the strength of the United States, based off of the location of Greenland, it's something that the U.S. could very likely get. But you just have to be careful because it is unpopular to take this territory, even if it just does become a territory for the United States. And the dominance within the Arctic for the United States, and the importance of the Arctic and the importance of the Northwest Passage. And I mean, all of that culminates around Greenland, and it's just such a unique plot of land that the U.S. could control for, you don't want to say nothing, but I mean, if we gave them $30 billion, Denmark, I think we could have it fairly easily. I would imagine if nothing happens to where the U.S., let's say Democrats rule for the next 50 years or whatever, let's just say, Trump was never in, my guess is that eventually, it would probably take a while, Greenland would become independent, completely independent of Denmark, and they would do some type of long-term deal with the EU. And they would become just an EU country. And the EU, in terms of them controlling Greenland, it would be the reason they would want to be controlled by the EU would be because they were already a proxy of Denmark, an EU country. And so that would probably be what would happen. Eventually, they'd be independent, but they'd be independent by name only. Independent of Denmark, that is. They would still have to get serious subsidies from many of the major European powers if they did some type of deal with the EU. And then also the question is, well, what about China? That China wants to do some type of deal with them. They tried to buy a previously abandoned military base. It wasn't allowed. It seems like they're open to it. And actually, Greenland was the ones that went to China and said, we want to do a deal with you guys. So that's something to watch. And that's really what Trump needs to have happen here, because that's how you fearmonger it. The key would be to say, well, China is going to potentially gain serious influence within Greenland, which you would think that the EU would not like. And so we need to take it over for the purposes of keeping the Chinese away from it. And that's another thing because Greenland's they're the ones that go to China and they want to do some type of, their diplomats say they want to do some type of deal with China in exchange for Arctic control. I mean, that's a big issue. That's something that can't happen, especially considering the location of Greenland within North America and Europe, because it's basically NATO land, right? It is NATO land. You can't have China influence that area. It's kind of like China influencing the Panama Canal and the United States being semi-aggressive and kicking them off. Trump, he hasn't fully unleashed on either Greenland, he's made threats, or the Panama Canal. They've made threats, but they haven't done it. They've made gains within Greenland, albeit very slight gains. It seems like they've alienated the people more, but they made gains with the Panama Canal because they kicked out the two Chinese ports. The Chinese ownership of the ports, the Hong Kong company that owned them. So we'll see if Trump is really aggressive. I think he knows it is something that's unpopular, but we know the history of Greenland. We know how important the area is in terms of the future. And it's one of those things to where diplomacy, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard one to do. I mean, unless there's something you're doing some type of other deal on the side to keep these European countries from getting too angry. I mean, you could just do it and they get angry, and so what happens? What are they going to do? They're not going to fight the United States over it. But this is one of those things to where you kind of just do it and then maybe people forget about it in a year. I mean, that's possible. I mean, there's only 57,000 people there. So you have to weigh things and you take everything into consideration. You could just maybe take the northern part of Greenland as well. I mean, that could be a possibility. Maybe you split it up and the south is still controlled by Greenland, and we take the northern parts and we're able to mine up there, and maybe that's something that could happen. I mean, it just depends. It depends how you want to play it exactly. I mean, it is a massive island, even though on a map it presents bigger than it actually is because of how warped maps are when they're put flat. But it is still a very big island, the world's biggest island. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But either way, guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.